From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Gleason.
Here.
Supervisor Scrivener.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Thank you, and welcome to the Tuesday, August 22nd, 2 p.m. session of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We are going to start off today with a report on actions taken in closed session, so I'll ask Mark Nations, County Counsel, to make that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is no reportable action from either 30 or 31 that were held in closed session following the morning session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nations. And now we will move on to the consent agenda. If you'd like to follow along with our agendas, they are available at the two back tables by the exits. Most of the items are on consent today. So starting on page 2, item 4 and item 5 are on consent. On page 3, all items 7 through 12 are on consent. On page 4, items 13 through 15 are on consent. On page 5, all items 16 through 20 are on consent. On page 6, all items 21 through 29 are on consent. However, on item 27, I have a correction to read into the record. The action on the agenda says approve, authorize chairman to sign. Strike that. And this, because this item has been withdrawn by the department, so it will not be heard. On page 7, all items 30 through 37 are on consent. And on page 8, all items 38 through 41 are on consent. So I'll ask, I didn't read a disclaimer. And so all those items that I just spoke to, listed with the CA, are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. So consent items will be heard first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the audience wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item or items on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken on the consent agenda. And a member of the board can remove any of those items to be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for the public to make any comments on the item. So now at this point, does anybody have any comments on the consent agenda that I just read? Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the board and ask if any board member would like to remove an item, or I would request a motion on consent.
Motion consent.
Second.
Motion and second, please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. Okay, so that takes us back to page 2 on our agenda. And item number 1 under resolutions and proclamations, this is a certificate of recognition honoring the Kern County College of Law for founding a new accredited law school campus in Kern County. And so Supervisor Couch is going to make that presentation. We don't need a motion, but okay, all right, good, we're on track. I see our presentee is here as well.
Mitch.
Supervisor Couch, when you're ready, please.
Thank you for coming today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my honor today to make this presentation and turn it over to Mitch Winnick. He's the Dean of the Kern County College of Law, but I want to say just a couple of words about him before we get started. Kern County College of Law is the only accredited law school in the region, and I want to mention just a couple of folks that are included in the as professors. One is our former county counsel, Terry Goldner. One is a former member of Lisa Green's team, Bud Starr, now Dean of Kern County College of Law. One is Judge Stephen Katz, former supervising attorney at the DA's office. Also David Kelly in the Public Defender's Office, as well as Stephanie Gunther, also in the Public Defender's Office, and Brandon Martin, my Chief of Staff. So I want to turn this over to the Dean, Mitch Winnick, here in just a moment. But I want to tell you a little bit about him. He is the Dean and President of Monterey College of Law, which includes the satellite campuses at San Luis Obispo College of Law and Kern County College of Law. And before entering the legal academy, he was a business consultant. So I want to read this recognition, Dean, and I want to turn it over to you for a couple of comments. This is a certificate of recognition presented to the Kern County College of Law in recognition of the college's new founding as an accredited law school campus here in Bakersfield, which promotes local legal scholarship and brings convenient higher level education, both traditional and non-traditional students in our community. And it's for exemplary public service and civic contributions to the community and to Kern County. It's signed by all the members of the Board of Supervisors, and it's dated today. What is today? August 22nd. Thank you. Dean, you want to give us a couple of comments and just tell us a little bit about the college?
Thank you very much.
I brought too much stuff with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor and members of the board. It's a great honor for us to be able to join this community as an educational partner. And we really think of ourselves as a partner. We're partnering with Bakersfield College, we're partnering with CSU Bakersfield, and with the other undergraduate programs here to provide an additional continuum in higher education. Because obviously you can't start law school without the underpinning of a solid education. And I would actually include the K-12 program here as well, because we are just part of that continuum. As we looked at the community of Bakersfield and the greater community of Kern County, we looked at the educational underpinning of the community and said, this was just a perfect place for us to be. You obviously have great pride in your educational systems. You've got great graduates that are coming out of those, and I have absolutely no doubt that they will be fabulous law students for us as well. I'll really close by saying and reminding you of what our purpose is. We're here as Kern County College of Law because we're your community law school. We are here to help those who already live here and work here and want to either change their career in an evening program or extend their education into the service of the community by legal education and lawyers. That's our goal. That's what we hope to do. We've done it for 45 years on the coast, and we hope to be here that long and longer here in the Central Valley as well. So thank you for welcoming us to your community. I hope to be able to come back and report good things from time to time.
Thank you. Supervisor Perez has a comment.
Thank you. I have a question, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome, and this is very exciting. I see you have Mr. Martin at your right hand, which is a smart move.
Thank you.
Regularly schooled me as a planning commissioner, and a remarkable mind indeed. Will you have a bar review course? Do you know if you'll offer one, or if there will be? Do you anticipate perhaps Barbary or others coming in? I know we've not had that in the past, so can you comment on that?
Well, we're actually unique in that. We have integrated bar review into our educational program. When I first came on board 12 years ago, our concern was too many of our graduates would finish law school and not have the money to actually spend on a bar review course, and it really diminished their chance of success. We solved it. We embedded Barbary and Kaplan into our curriculum. So it's not just studying after you graduate. We really begin the process in the first year of law school. It's integrated all the way through. So there's none of our graduates will fail to complete a bar review course before they sit.
Very good. Thank
It's
you.
also embedded in the tuition, so they don't have to worry about coming up with the money at the last minute.
I'm sure they're grateful for that, yes.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, but Will, how about somebody who goes to law school out of the area? Would they be able to take a bar review course at this place if they go to law school out of state or out of the area, but live here and need to prepare while at home?
Yeah, the odds are very good. It's a little hard for me to know what their circumstances are, but in all of our other locations, if we're holding courses on our campus, we allow outsiders to come in as well. They pay the money directly to the provider, but they're allowed to come and take the course at our location.
I see. Very good. Well, welcome, and
Thank you.
and congrats. Hats off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda will be public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. So at this point, I'll ask if there's anyone here that would like to make a public presentation on any matter not on our agenda today. Good morning, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Board. David Fluhart, Havelock First District. It's been a while since I've been here. So many familiar, kind faces and all that good stuff. Anyways, carrying on, later on today, you're going to hear option A and B, and there's an option C that didn't quite make the book. And anyways, I wrote a nice little pamphlet information for you guys, so I'll give it to Ms. Krause, and you guys can read it in your own spare leisurely time for fun and entertainment. And that's pretty much it, except I'm happy to be here. And unfortunately, I'll be going home pretty quick. So that's about it, and you guys have a good day and good job and all that good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fluhart. Any other public presentations? Okay, seeing none then, we'll move on to board member announcements and reports. Item 3. Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Perez and I have served in the past on a pedestrian safety subcommittee that meets with 2 members of the Bakersfield City Council. I believe that would be Mr. Rivera. And who's the other one? Thank you, Chris Parlier. And we are interested in bringing that back up and would ask staff to help us. I'm making a referral to staff to help us to staff that meeting and get that going again, to get it scheduled. There are a number of questions that we would like to have researched before we meet, and they have to do with an analysis of the pedestrian and bicycle accidents that have occurred. There were 28 deaths in 2016. There have been 23 so far in 17, so there's clearly a growing concern over this. But we'd like an analysis of, Supervisor Perez and I would like an analysis of these accidents to include the location where the pedestrian was in a crosswalk, where the pedestrian was not, where the accident occurred, where it was mid-block, or jaywalking is another way to say that. Was it in the daylight or the dark? Were there street lights? Would it be helpful to have street lights in a certain area? Just a whole analysis of the I have several other questions I can give staff here. John Pryor wrote a very interesting community voice a few days ago and suggested many of the same ideas, so I'll give him props for doing that. So I would just like staff to help us to get that meeting scheduled, coordinate it with the city, and let's make sure, I'll give you another, rather than go through every detail here, this whole list of questions that Supervisor Perez and I would like to have answered so we can have the biggest impact we can have when we get together with our colleagues at the city. Okay, thank you very much.
Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. Supervisor Maggard, it was really striking to be with members of BARC, the Independent Living Center, the homeless shelter, folks we worked really closely with a couple years ago to launch this education process. So we are very excited to move and transition into a public campaign. Supervisor Maggard and I have wrestled over territory in East Bakersfield that we share and love so much. So this is really an exciting, really exciting partnership with the city, the county, and of course, many folks in the county that make it happen, like Craig Pope. But I would like to also ask the planning director's assistance as we move forward. One of Supervisor Maggard's recommendations was some lighting in some of the very dark parts of the county and an area we know create issues for pedestrians. And I raised the concern about a potential of a Prop 218 vote, which we've had challenges with in the past, getting folks to pay for that electricity or voting to pay for it. And then Supervisor Maggard suggested some solar lights potentially. So I know you have, Ms. Oviatt, have bantied about with our chairman about providing really cutting-edge solar lights in very dark places of the county. So I would like to employ your help, Director. I know we don't have to talk about that now, but I'm excited about the next steps as it's lots of attention and lots of need.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. Okay, seeing no other requests, and then we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda. This is an item under the Planning and Natural Resources Department. This is a briefing on cannabis land use ordinance and draft environmental impact report. And I'll ask Lorelei Oviatt, the director of our Planning and Natural Resources Department, to start us off. Ms. Oviatt, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. I'm here today with Craig Murphy, my division chief, and in the front row assisting me is Suzanne Hansen, the planner who's been working on the cannabis team. We have provided you with a copy of this PowerPoint, and we will be posting it online. In addition, we have provided you with a one-page summary sheet, which was also provided in the back. Go. This briefing, this is a very deep issue and has a lot of moving parts, so this is considered an overview briefing. We are going to get into some details, and certainly we can answer your questions, but we can also take those questions and incorporate those into the response to comments for the environmental impact report. This briefing is not intended to give you a full overview of what the county has done in the past. Starting at a higher level, in 1996, however, the Compassionate Care Act, which was California Proposition 215, was passed, allowing the use of medical cannabis. It did not provide for any state oversight or licensing, so for 18 years, the county has attempted to manage this new industry with uneven results and no support from the state and limited support from the courts. We are now in a new era with the passage of Proposition 64, which passed statewide on November 8th, 2016. In January 1st, 2018, state licensing will begin. We do note that the collective structure that we have now, where you can have a brick and mortar collective with thousands and thousands of patients, will disappear on January 2nd, 2018. The state has collapsed that into adult use. You can still be a primary caregiver with 5 or fewer patients, but the collective with tens of thousands of people for one caregiver and a brick and mortar has been repealed. Therefore, everyone will be under this new state licensing, and the state licensing will be under 3 agencies, led by the Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation in the Bureau of Consumer Affairs. The California Department of Public Health Office of Manufactured Cannabis Safety is responsible for cannabis-infused edibles for both medical and non-medical use. And the California Department of Food and Agriculture Cannabis Cultivation Licensing is going to develop regulations to license cultivators of both medical and adult use and implement a track and trace system to record the movement of cannabis through the distribution chain and to create a statewide software to track the collection of taxes and accountability. The referral from your board to the planning department has been implemented with consultation with county council and the CAO's office, and your direction was to bring an environmental impact report that looked at comprehensive options to comprehensively ban it or comprehensively regulate it. And we have provided you an environmental impact report, which is right now going through public comment. Hold on. The 2 options are for the management of commercial and personal use medicinal and recreation cannabis only in the unincorporated county. So none of the discussions that we have today would affect the city. The first option we provided you is a ban. This ban would repeal all the prior ordinances. It would repeal the medicinal marijuana ordinances we have, the allowance to grow 12 plants on a legal lot, and the current moratorium. So as a reminder, when this ordinance comes to your board, irrespective of the recommendation of the Planning Commission, both ordinances will come to your board such that your board is not constrained in taking an action on either ordinance. Under a ban, we would adopt a new ordinance that would ban all commercial cannabis activities. We would reiterate the ban that is in Proposition 64, which says you cannot use it in a public place unless a local jurisdiction allows you. We would put it in our ordinance to be clear that you could not use it in a public place, in county parks, we are also allowed to ban the outdoor cultivation of the 6 plants for personal use. So you cannot ban inside or regulate growing of 6 plants for personal use inside, but you could ban it outside or put other restrictions on it. This option would also create an established funded cannabis activity enforcement task force, which was reviewed in the environmental impact report, and we can talk about in a moment on the next slide. And there would be an amortization program for the 22 existing court-determined legal retail medical dispensaries. There are 22 dispensaries that the courts have ruled were established under the 2009 ordinance. 22. We have a map of those 22. We have addresses for those 22. And they would be allowed under a ban to operate for 1 year, but only if they received a temporary state license, and they could only operate for medicinal cannabis only. So they could not expand their usage to adult use. Then they would close after that 1-year amortization process. This amortization is a legal term. I defer to County Council Nations. If you have questions about it, it is a legal requirement that we allow for a certain phasing out of this established use. All illegal retail dispensaries, those that opened after the moratorium or were not on the list of 22, would have to close immediately. Next. The fiscal public services impact of this has been determined. The Planning Department has worked with the sheriff, the district attorney, and county council and others to look at what would it take to have a proactive detection and investigation system to keep commercial activities from proliferating. As you know, in the past, we have had a complaint-driven enforcement, meaning that when we heard about one of these, we would go, or if we drove by and we saw one. This would be a proactive system. As you can see, the fiscal, the enforcement task force has been designed. Next slide. It would have partial staffing the first year, since the state would still be gearing up for licensing and we would still be implementing our ordinance. Second and third year, we would have focused, enhanced activity. And the cost right now for the staffing and equipment is $1.2 million to $2.7 million a year. We are still dealing with the state issues in regards to the possibility of finding funding from the state. The state taxation on adult use and medicinal cannabis is projected to produce $1 billion a year. In your staff report, I have allocated that the legislature actually has already designated different pots of money or places that money has to go. The state has indicated that they would be interested in contracting with local jurisdictions for enforcement. However, the question of whether a city or a county that completely bans is going to be high on their list to provide that funding is not known yet. And there are many conversations that still need to be had with the state, and we are having those conversations through CSAC, the League of California Cities, as well as through our representatives. We have not been able to identify any federal funding that could be used for this particular type of enforcement of a zoning ordinance. The second option is to regulate it. So once again, a regulation would repeal all ordinances that are on the books for medical marijuana and current moratorium. Therefore, the current ordinance that the court had reinstated, which said that a medical dispensary could go wherever there's a pharmacy, would be repealed. We would adopt new standards and conditions for commercial activities with new zoning and new standards, and we would establish setbacks, half a mile from schools, public parks, large family daycare centers, youth centers, and city limits. These are a reflection of what the state licensing has adopted. However, their setback is 1,000 feet. So we are proposing half a mile and not 1,000 feet. And there are definitions of these types of uses in the proposed ordinance. Hold on this one. We would establish limits on development and restrict the zone districts. The environmental impact report, which was mandated by the court, is fully compliant with CEQA. We needed a number, and we also wanted to be sure that if your board decides to regulate, there is a clear message on how much and where this type of industry would be allowed. Therefore, the upper limit would be 2 million square feet of indoor cultivation in greenhouses and warehouses, 500,000 square feet of buildings for what is called processing and preparation, edibles, infused drinks, oils, and solids. The industry is moving from the use of the actual product to the production of oils from that product, from the actual plant. They produce it into oils, and then the oils are put into edibles, they're put into different kinds of delivery systems. We looked at 150 acres of outdoor cultivation. The size of that was based on the fact that you can only get a permit for 1 acre at a time from the state of California under their licensing, so 150 acres is actually a lot of permits. The structure that the state has designed says that every cultivator must send their product to an independent testing lab first, and a cultivator cannot own a dispensary. So the two things cannot be the same. And just as they have a distribution system for alcohol that tests and tags and puts a stamp on it, the state is proposing the same sort of distribution system for cannabis. Either medicinal or adult use, has to go to an independent testing lab. The testing lab cannot own a cultivator, cannot own a dispensary, and is required to have standards that are established in the regulations that are now being developed. Those regulations include, what is in the product, are there pesticides that shouldn't be in the product, is it packaged properly, and it is a form of track and trace. So they are putting together a program, which has been used in other states, called Track and Trace, from seed to sale, so that every seed has, and every plant has a tracking number and has to be tracked through the system. They're doing this, one, to force out illegal cannabis from the dispensaries. So your dispensary can only sell things that are in the track and trace system, and that is subject to audit and it's subject to inspection by the state of California. Second, it's to make sure that it's not leaving the state. We have 8 states now out of 29 states that have legalized some form of marijuana, 29 states. Of those 29 states, 8 states have legalized both adult use and medical, and that cannabis that's cultivated in the state cannot leave that state. So this is the state's way of creating an inventory and tracking system, just as they're a tracking system for alcohol, to make sure that what you buy for alcohol is not made in someone's basement, is to make sure that this cannabis has been through a testing program. And we are proposing 5 analytical labs countywide. Then in addition, there are distribution and transport. So once it is sent from the analytical lab, there are distribution established. You have to have a license for distribution to be able to then deliver it to the dispensaries or wherever you're delivering it. And so we would have 20 of those countywide. Retail stores are limited to 40 countywide, and there may not even be 40, but no more than 2 in any unincorporated community. We are designing the maps that show what an unincorporated community is. It's based on our housing element. It's based on other considerations where we have communities. Those maps will be released in the response to comments to the environmental impact report and provided to the Planning Commission and your board. Next. Oops. The greenhouses are in agricultural zones only. They are a site plan. So if you follow all the rules, you receive a permit. Warehousing is in agricultural and industrial. If you follow all the rules, you receive a permit. Processing and preparation is in agricultural and industrial. Outdoor cultivation would be in agricultural. As you note, however, retail stores, which are in commercial and industrial only, would require a conditional use permit. And a conditional use permit is a discretionary action that does require public notice to the neighbors. It requires a hearing in front of the Planning Commission. And depending on the result of the Planning Commission, could either be appealed by the applicant to your board or by the neighbors to your board, and can be denied. It is totally possible that an unincorporated community would have no retail dispensaries based on the request does not meet the neighborhood compatibility, or perhaps they're asking for a relaxation of the development standards, which the Planning Commission could consider. Next. In conjunction with a regulatory, there are many other ordinances that would also be brought forward to change. One is we would amend the uniform rules for the Williamson Act and Farmland Security Zone to exempt this agricultural use from being allowed to have a contract and reduced property taxes. This is something that we have already discussed with the Department of Conservation and others, including the Farm Bureau, and indicated that we do believe that this particular agricultural industry, your board could obviously this would be a recommendation from us, that should not be subject to the Williamson Act contracts, which at this time are not subvented by the state of California. This would not change anything else for anybody else who already has a Williamson Act or who wants one for their other crops. We would also recommend that at that time, if you regulated, you reiterate the ban on public parks, county parks, and vendors. You could not sit on a patio outside a cafe and use cannabis. We would not be permitting lounges where you could listen to music and use cannabis. Under the licensing system, under Proposition 64, cannabis and alcohol cannot be used in the same place. So you would not be able to go to a bar and buy edibles at a bar legally, and that could be turned into the state for action. We would also, the state legislature just recently decided that county fairs and state fairs could have cannabis vendors. We would recommend, if we brought forward a regulatory, that you make a referral to amend the lease with the county fair to ban cannabis vendors. And we would also not be allowing cannabis products, even under a regulate, to be sold at farmers markets. These recommendations are based on conversations with public health and others about inside the community, about what a restrictive regulatory proposal would be. And so we are not, under this regulatory proposal, indicating that everything would be allowed, but instead that it would be very restrictive. We are suggesting, under this proposal, which once again is just a proposal, can change based on public comments, that if you did regulate it, you might consider allowing outdoor personal growing, but the areas would have to have a locked entrance and they could not be viewed from a public walkway or a roadway. I have not included, hold on this one, the ordinance which you have been provided and a summary that you've been provided. There is a very long list of standards on all of these regulatory proposals. For example, on the greenhouses. Greenhouses would have to have high-tech ventilation systems to ensure that there is no odor that leaves those greenhouses. Dispensaries also would have to have ventilation systems that make sure that there's no odors that leave from their product or go into other uses next door. The greenhouses would have to have security. They could not have tours. They could not be like wineries that have tasting rooms. They would have to be completely self-secured, and signage would be limited. So there is a long list of these types of restrictions, many of which are consistent with the state of California and some of which are more restrictive than the state of California. Under the option B, regulate, the 22 existing court-determined could operate for 2 years if they had a temporary state license for medicinal cannabis only. And during those 2 years, they had two choices. They could continue for 2 years and find another location that they could apply for a conditional use permit, or they could apply for a conditional use permit for their current location. If they did not obtain a conditional use permit for their current location, they would close after 2 years. All illegal retail dispensaries would have to close immediately. If they did not close immediately, they could not apply for a conditional use permit. And any outstanding court fees or other sorts of charges would have to be, based on recommendations from county council to your board, would have to be determined what the illegal dispensaries would have to do to complete that record before we could allow them to move forward to apply for a conditional use permit. Now, in some cases, there could be circumstances. For example, one of the examples that we could use is you are a dispensary and you are not half a mile from a school. You are a little less than half a mile from a school, but there is a refinery or there's a freeway or there's something between you and the school such that the school kids are never going to walk by your dispensary, they're never going to see your dispensary. You still have to process a conditional use permit, but the ordinance allows that they could bring forward their evidence, they could bring forward their facts, and they could request a variance. Once again, it's a full discretionary public hearing before the Planning Commission with the neighbors, with public notice that could be appealable to the board. And this is a due process issue as discussed with county council, that in all cases, when you regulate, you must allow for a process for people to request a variance of the standards that you have. It does not mean that they automatically get the variance, but it does provide for the unique situations that come up that may not fit the standards. Next. We have provided to your board in the package today a copy of the fiscal report that was provided by Nadelson Dale Group, and that was provided in Appendix K of the Environmental Impact Report. It shows the public services impacts. It shows the revenue. This is a conservative estimate based on only the numbers that are in the EIR, meaning the 2 million square feet of cultivation and the numbers that have been provided. It's conservative because it's only based on a percentage of users in Kern County. So the state of California has done, the Department of Finance has actually done a study for the state of California, and they have used a factor of a percentage based on Colorado and Washington State on how many people over 21 could possibly use adult use or medical, and then we discounted that number for Kern County as well. So this is a very conservative estimate. However, property taxes are based on valuation. So the valuation on the 2 million square feet of a greenhouse is based on what a greenhouse is valued. The annual property tax at full build out is $498,805. The property tax to schools is a little under $1 million. The sales tax is a little over $1 million. And of course, that is completely based on this conservative assumption of sales. So the total to the county general fund would be $1.6 million. Next. In addition, the EIR is required to mitigate impacts on public services. So the mitigation measure proposes a 45-cent a square foot building mitigation impact. This is not on the canopy of the cannabis, which you should keep in mind when we talk about this possible referral for a tax that the voters tax. This is actually every square foot, whether it's a bathroom or the front office. If it's a cannabis operations, it will pay this 45 cents. The allocation, this mitigation measure will be undergoing some revisions in the response to comments, which I want to touch on, because we have received some comments and discussions with mental health and the homeless collaborative in regards to some other public services that need to be mitigated. So first, the treasurer tax collector has indicated that they would need the construction of a cash counting room, and that would be a one-time up to $300,000 allocation. Public health, you can see the other allocations on here. We will be changing those to percentages such that as the funding comes in, we can allocate, since we won't have the total until there's total build out. Community benefit fund is something that would be a new funding source for community groups that do drug and alcohol education for children, teens, and young adults up to the age of 20. The mitigation measure says that your board could extend it to adults past that age, but at this point, that was the proposal. The idea behind this grant funding, which would, right now is up to $508,000 and is proposed to go to $1 million, would be that your board would delegate perhaps to public health or another appropriate department. And these would be grants. They would not necessarily have to be used for cannabis education because the whole realm of drug and alcohol education is very intertwined. So while they're doing cannabis education, they're also doing opiates and methamphetamines. These types of grants where there are not a lot of strings attached are getting very difficult to find for these organizations. So once again, this is not for treatment programs. There are other sources of funding for that. This is actually for drug and alcohol education. In addition, we have studies that have just come to our attention that we've been looking at, that there's a possibility of increasing our homeless population by attracting young people who come to use the adult use marijuana and really have no place to live and stay. So we would be proposing to amend this mitigation measure in the response to comments to include a contribution to groups that do outreach and housing for the homeless, such as the groups that are part of the homeless collaborative, In addition, we are talking to, about a contribution for mental health services. So those are changes that are based on public comments that we're still in conversation about. Next slide. The fiscal report that you have received analyzed the possibility of a voter tax on cannabis. It also included all of the taxes that have been adopted in counties and what the results were when they went to the voters. This is a simple majority tax for passage, and it's phased in 2 stages, which is consistent with the rest of the taxes in the state. On cultivation, it's the square footage of the canopy. Canopy is defined as any place that you could grow a cannabis plant. So if there was a greenhouse, whether they planted the cannabis plant or not into the table, even if the table had no plants on it, they would pay this tax on that square footage of those tables that occupy that cultivation. So on cultivation, it's based on square footage, and it starts at $5, ramps to $7.50, and goes to $10 a square foot from then on. On retail processing and preparation facilities, it's based on a percentage of gross sales, and once again, it is incrementally. This is not the lowest tax in California, but it's also not the highest tax. We did look at we did take a moderate approach, and you can see the background information in the fiscal. Next. At full build-out in 2022, this would produce annual revenue of $16.7 million for the retail and processing, $16.3 million for the indoor cultivation, and $4.9 million for the outdoor cultivation. These are, once again, conservative numbers. Next. We have estimated 8,750 full-time jobs. This is based on information from ongoing operations in other counties, which have been going on for some time, that tell us, also we've compared these to Colorado and other places, that tell us what does it take to process and prepare, for example, and what does it take to trim and pollinate and whatever else they're doing in this indoor cultivation in regards to move. This is a very labor-intensive industry. There is some mechanisms that can be brought to bear, but it's highly dependent on labor. The labor right now, wages range from $15 to $22 an hour for this industry. And we have not estimated the construction activity jobs, and we are still getting that information for this size of construction. I'd like to touch on the environmental impact report, and I'd like to thank Kimley Horn and Associates, our consultant, who worked with staff. This is a very accelerated schedule. They did assist us in development of the draft ordinances and EIR. I would like to note this is the first EIR in the state that a city or county has done on cannabis. Therefore, we really appreciated their help in actually trying to get the information we needed to bring you the facts, and where we didn't have the facts, we were able to find information that we could extrapolate. We have sent out the notice of preparation in January and February, and we are in the middle of our EIR circulation. We've distributed over 425 copies. It's in every library. It is online at our website, as well as the ordinances. The option A has 1 mitigation measure, and option B regulated has 83. And those mitigation measures have been provided to you. We still do have significant and unavoidable impacts after mitigation. Next. People have often wondered, why would we have any impacts if we ban it? Well, the point here is that people from Kern County will drive someplace else to either get their medication for medicinal or for adult use. Therefore, we had to estimate where would they drive, how many trips would that be, and therefore we do have a significant impact on air quality and greenhouse gases, transportation, and traffic. As noted, we do not have the funding, we do not know a location for the funding to enforce this ban, therefore we have an unmitigated public services impact. Next slide. The regulate does result in construction, and therefore we have a longer list of significant and unavoidable impacts. We have placed in this list of 83 mitigation measures all of the different things that they have to do. While it is an unusual industry from the perspective of what your board is considering, it is normal from the perspective of they're building a greenhouse, they're retrofitting a warehouse. These are all things that we already have codes for, we already inspect for the fire department, and so many of these mitigations are the same mitigations that other builders. Some of the mitigations, however, go beyond that. For example, we are now requiring on our construction projects a payment into a valley fever fund to provide the public health department with educational resources to be able to do more education on valley fever. So one of the mitigations is a one-time $3,200 per applicant, per construction job for valley fever, and we are doing that on others of our EIRs. These projects would be required to work with the San Joaquin, if they are in the San Joaquin Air District, since this is countywide, they would be required to do a developer mitigation contract and reduce their impacts to zero, just as other builders do. In their case, however, in regards to water, for example, the indoor cultivation has less water impacts than outdoor, and outdoor cultivation is one of the more problematic parts of this regulatory proposal. It has many more impacts. It has odors that cannot be mitigated. It has high security problems, and it uses more water. So outdoor cultivation is one of the things in the environmental impact report that does rise to the level of having more impacts. Next. We did look at other alternatives as required in an environmental impact report. The purpose of an alternative is to reduce the significant impact. So we looked at the no project alternative, which was required by law. Unfortunately, under our current situation legally, the no project alternative actually results in dispensaries being built. If we take no action, our moratorium will expire and our 2009 ordinance will take effect, and we will then be required to allow dispensaries any place you can put a pharmacy, which means any commercial site. Therefore, unlike most EIRs, this one actually has more impacts from the no project alternative. We also looked at retail cannabis stores only, since the cannabis stores have a smaller footprint, and that is one of the alternatives. And then a reduced project. So the reduced project is to take, rather than 2 million square feet, some smaller amount. The superior alternative is the retail cannabis stores only, but as a reminder to the public and your board, this is a disclosure document. Your board is not required to adopt the superior alternative. There are other considerations that you can take into account. Next steps. The draft EIR comment period ends September 11th. However, as you know, we continue to take comments right up until the board votes, so that should not discourage anyone from providing us comments as they find new information. We have scheduled a Planning Commission hearing for consideration of this September 28th. The staff overview that your board received today has been provided to the full Planning Commission, so the Planning Commission does have all information that your board has. And then we anticipate having hearings in October for the Board of Supervisors. This schedule was designed based on the January 2nd, 2018 permitting that the state will begin. If we have no ordinance in place by that time, we'll be subject to a few more months after that, the 2009. This, of course, just tells you where you can find out more information. That completes my presentation, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oviatt. I'll ask if there are any members of the board that have questions or comments before I go to the public.
I have a question.
Supervisor Perez.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Oviatt, why are we the first jurisdiction to conduct a full-blown EIR under CEQA?
Supervisor Perez, because the court told us to. Many other people adopted their ordinance, nobody sued them, and so they didn't have to do one.
The statute passed on challenging those ordinances up north and other places.
That's correct. However, there are at least 4 counties now that have told me they've been challenged and are considering doing environmental impact reports.
Very good. Thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you, Supervisor. Let me get an idea of how many folks would like to actually speak on this item. Okay. All right, great. Madam Clerk, let's set the clock for 30 minutes, and we'll get through the speakers. So whoever would like to speak first, please come forward.
Chairman,
afternoon.
Board of Supervisors, my name is Gabriel Godinez. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for allotting the time and having the community input regarding this particular issue. It's been an issue ongoing with the county for a number of years. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Ms. Lorelei Oviatt. She's been at it, not only having an open door policy with community, but with all information from every side. And I want to say thank you, Lorelei, for the information. She's definitely an asset to the county. One of the things I wanted to address, to have looked at or considered, is the half-mile radius regarding the location and items that are laid out in the ordinance, and what negative effect it would have on potential county islands. I don't know if that's been considered, and also the issue, and the reason that comes to head is the language, any incorporated city legal boundaries. So then anything within the boundaries within the city of Arvin, Taft, any of the outlying communities, then it wouldn't be in line with the ordinance. So I'm asking the board to consider a less restrictive amount of space. And it's not uncommon, it's been done before here in the county, and the example that I'm gonna be using is the adult entertainment. It's up to 1,500 feet, 1,500. So it's just over a half a mile. I'm sorry. So we have half a mile at 264, so it would be just over a quarter of a mile. Quarter mile is 1,320 feet. So it's not uncommon. We had this in place with other industries, and I'm asking the board to consider that and what impact that would have with implementing the ordinance. And everything's still in place regarding that boundary regarding schools, daycares, and all of those things will still be in place. But I'm just saying on the distance that we should be considered. And also, it still includes the 1,000, and it's still greater than what the state is mandating at 1,000 feet. So we still have additional protections there, but then something that's not too restrictive. And the reason I think we need to look at not being too restrictive is we don't want to get into an issue that we had with Measure G. It passed, it was implemented, but it was so restrictive. I think there were only one or two places within the county that fell within the descriptions where you could actually have a storefront. And I believe that's what prompted the challenge. That's what prompted the CEQA action. And then that's what led to where we are now. So I think that's something that should be considered and taken, given a train of thought in order to avoid any potential challenges on this particular regulation regarding that distance. So really, what is the effect of imposing a 1,500-foot restriction? I think that's one thing I think we should address and have for the board, and ultimately the Planning Commission to consider as well. And then one thing is the hours of operation. I'm requesting that what would be the effect of having the hours of operation be from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Right now in the proposal, it's 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So here I'm suggesting we give basically 12 hours, and that's it. 10 to 10 seems reasonable, especially now we're looking at the recreational and still the issue of a possible medicinal enactment of cannabis here in the county. It seems unclear in the ordinance concerning medicinal cannabis as well as recreational. I think there's a gap that I think needs to be addressed. If they're going to phase out, there's a gap of individuals. In order to be able to purchase for recreational use, it's 21 or older. That's fine. But I think there's a gap if you have those who are 18 to 21 with medical, or even those maybe younger than 18 with a medical issue, in order for them to attain their cannabis in a legal and safe way. I don't think are we going to be able to have a hybrid? Does it have to be one or the other? Can we have the same type of industry, whether for recreational and medicinal, at the same location? I think there's a gap there. I don't think that's been addressed, and I'd like to know what impact that would be within the county regarding this particular ordinance. And we want to make sure that everyone's in compliance. And in order to fill that gap, that particular issue, I think, needs to be addressed. Now, looking into the limit per two unincorporated communities, I know Ms. Lorelei Oviatt stated that there will be a map outlining what these communities are, but the question I have, how are we going to identify those? Lamont, Hilltop, Dusty Acres, any county islands, East Bakersfield, Mettler, and how is that going to be addressed? And I know we're still going through that, and I think maybe when the map gets laid out, maybe those questions will be answered, but I'm not sure if that's been considered or taken into consideration. Because if we look at the outlining communities, if you're looking prospectively for 2, it will exceed 40. I know we're limiting the dispensaries to 40, but then trying to figure out how to map that out, that we're in compliance with what the county's trying to put forward here, or the suggestion on to regulate. One of the questions regarding indoor cultivation, packaging, processing, and testing, going to that particular aspect of the regulation. Section L in each of those, in the presentation and in the proposed ordinance states all on-site energy use shall be provided or offset with solar. So I was a little confused. Do we have to initially have solar now? Something we phase into? I wasn't quite sure and how clear that was in the ordinance itself. And I didn't see it addressed in the EIR, but mind you, that EIR was huge, so it may be in there, I just probably didn't see it. But it wasn't clear in the ordinance how that would be addressed going forward. One of the other things, real quick, is, and it was brought up with Ms. Oviatt regarding a cash house. There may be a banking issue. Cannot bank in your normal setting as a normal business. I didn't know if the county was considering looking to assist those particular businesses with, you can't do a banking, but have something in place. I don't think it's addressed how the monies will be paid, how it would be categorized, or how it would be identified for each in particular business here within the county. So I think Ms. Oviatt touched on it, but it's clear, and I think a little bit more information would be had so then everyone's on the same page, and then the county can have a clearer indication of the numbers of what the prospective numbers are for revenue or just for the operating for these storefront collectives or dispensaries. Now, regarding the ban, that is another option. I would encourage the board not to vote for the ban. I think it poses a bunch of different issues, many of that Ms. Lorelei Oviatt had already addressed. Enforcement, where are the funds? Is it general funds that these monies are coming from in our coffers? The ban, and I don't know if it's been considered, if there is a ban, you have a number of 22 different collectives that have been identified as being legal within the county. Has the county looked at the issue, if the ban goes into effect, they look to phase these particular collectives out, what the negative effect would be, because you potentially have a legal non-conforming argument that these collectives were legal at one time. The law changed now, so they're legal non-conforming, so we're opening up the county to additional litigation, and actually spending more money to try and enforce this ban. The last question I have, or one of the last questions I have, within the last 5 years, how much money has the county spent on on legal fees from county council, legal fees from outside counsel that the county has hired in order to try to close down the collective or dispensaries? How much within the last 5 years? How much has been spent? I think that's one thing to take into consideration, because if a ban goes into effect, I believe the county is still looking at potential litigation regarding the legal nonconforming use. So I respectfully request that some of the issues that I address, hopefully they get answered, to give more information to everyone so we can make a decision on what's best for everyone, health, safety, and welfare. Trying to strike a balance between those three. So I encourage the board to vote for regulation, but have regulation with our eyes open, and so we know what we're dealing with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Godinez, and we will ask staff to answer the questions that they're able to at the conclusion of the public comment period. Who'll be next, please?
Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for your time. I'm glad to be back here again. Oh, there's a light here. That's even awesome, more awesome.
By the way, I do have to commend Lorelei for her work, and every time I talk to her, I clearly understand everything, and she is such a great asset to our county. So my name is Ann Berna. I'm the director at the Family Resource Center in Fraser Park. I think you know this. And I also oversee a drug-free community support grant, Fraser Park. We have a coalition that works about reducing underage drinking and substance abuse in our area. So our motto is lock up your alcohol, lock up your prescription drugs, and now we get to say lock up your marijuana. So this marijuana train is coming, whether we want it or not. I don't envy the seats that you're sitting in because of the decisions that you have to make. But we do have an opportunity to be very proactive. We can take an approach to protect our youth and our children. In Colorado alone, they have experienced and this is with the Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Control statistics, they have over 200% increase in calls for children 0 to 8 because of marijuana edibles. 30% increase in emergency room because of marijuana edibles. And they've also experienced 109 increase just in general to the poison control, and that's from the the Center for Disease Control. So what do we do to stop these kinds of results in our community if in fact you go forward with Plan B? What would it take to change our cultural views? Would it be as simple as saying, lock up your marijuana? It's changing the community norms because it's harmful to our kids. Well, changing community norms isn't easy. It's a challenge, but it's doable. It takes time, but if you start now, things can change in the future. If you don't start, it'll never change. So what I'm proposing is let's think this through. What can we do in a positive manner to keep our kids safe? Because that's what this is really all about for me. Not only does it take time, but it's sustainable. Because if you can change the views of people getting to lock up their marijuana, it's a huge thing. They don't have access to it, and that's what we want to stop. So if you choose to approve the licensing or option B, I'm glad to see too that you are willing to support those of us and our local coalitions working to protect our youth and our children. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, please.
All right, my name is Mike Espandola. I'm representing County Line Organics out of Ridgecrest. We just want to know how you guys came up with the 22 before we were open before the prior date of the May 16th, 2016. We have been paying our payroll taxes, our sales taxes to your county prior to that. We have over 3,500 patients, and I want to ask Susan and young lady right here, how did they come up with that, and how did we get? I'm already getting a packet form together to show you all our sales taxes, our payroll taxes, our bills that we've been paying prior to this date. What else do I have to do to bring to you guys so we could get on that list? Because we have 3,500 patients, and these patients cannot drive 120 miles to go get their medication from where they're at right now located.
Okay. As I said, we'll attempt to answer all the questions at the end of the public comment period.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Who'll be next, please?
How you doing? My name is Anthony Espandola. I'm concerned, I didn't see in the environmental impact report anywhere where it mentioned if we did ban, where would that money go that was going to the legal dispensaries? Theoretically, they go to more black market, corrupt industries. Definitely where we don't want to see our money going to cartels, gangbangers. We don't want to add that drama to the border. So we want to take that into consideration as well. And I didn't see those numbers in there. I did notice in a news article that quoted the University of California's, they did a paper and they published it in their Journal of Urban, sorry, I lost my note. But they reported that during their study, they found that they had a 12% instant increase when closing down medical marijuana dispensaries in California. They closed down 410 and 12% instant increase. Colorado did the same report. They found an 8% instant increase in crime. And of course, there's more people in LA County than there is in the whole state of Colorado. So we also have to take that into consideration, the uptake of crime and closing down all these legal dispensaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'll be next, please?
Hi, my name is TJ Esposito. I'm here on behalf of Americans for Safe Neighborhood, a federal super PAC, and more importantly, I'm a local citizen and expert in marijuana. I'd just like to take about a minute and talk about the yes vote to regulate. Issuing licenses will give law-abiding citizens a stake in the game. These people will be held to a strict policy and standard that will be governed by those stakeholders, that will require minimal government intervention. Establishing systems and guidelines with the spirit of transparency and safety will only help eliminate marijuana crimes and cartel activity in Kern County. A good ordinance is key to creating a safe environment for patients, employees, and communities, as well as consumer protections, which are desperately needed. An industry that is well regulated requires minimal government intervention and will create a safe and fruitful opportunity for Kern County. So fruitful that you're going to need a room to count all the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'll be next, please? Come forward. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us today. My name is Kieran Dowling. I'm a agronomic consultant and farmer.
Would you spell that, please? The clerk, I think, we're
Sure. Kieran, K-I-E-R-A-N.
And your last name?
Dowling, D-O-W-L-I-N-G.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to make a few points in that Kern County is obviously an agriculturally dominated county. And if we look at the current production across California, we look at the Emerald Triangle, as they call it, and it's a very undesirable place to grow. I think that we can take a lot of the business from the Emerald County with the established network of farmers with experience, prime soil, and available water supplies. I also wanted to point out on the acreage totals there that we had maybe come up with, there was no mention of nursery production, and it seems like it can be either outdoor or greenhouse, but there explicitly implies in the new ordinance that there's acreage restrictions don't apply to nursery cultivation. So I was wondering what the county view of having nurseries available is. And third point, I was wondering on the taxation rates. Like all things, agricultural commodities are subject to supply and demand. And as the supply grows over time, the demand will decrease. So I wanted to ask on the staging of the price increase over time, if it's, I think it's more reasonable and sustainable to base that tax percentage on gross sales to really reflect the changing dynamics of the price inevitably over the next 3 years. We're looking at dramatic inflation, so deflation, I'm sorry. And that's it, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jordan Jarvis. I am a Kern County resident. I've been a Kern County resident since 2010. I've lived in both Bakersfield and now the outskirts of the unincorporated areas of our county. I'd like to speak about my concerns for public safety. I agree with you guys. Public safety is first and foremost. You can't beat safety. Safety's first. That's like the #1 rule for everything. So my concern is that if we go ahead and vote option A into effect, that in essence we hand over the ability from our regulations to the mobs, to the gangs, and the first people that are going to be the victims are going to be our kids on the streets, because that's where drug dealers go sell drugs, is to kids. We all know this. So I'm really worried that if option A passes with a full ban, that we're really putting our children in harm's way and posing a major public safety actually and a risk by doing that. I basically also know that our county doesn't have money to enforce a ban. We don't have money to enforce what's currently going on, and it's turned into the Wild West out here. If we take measures into our own hands and control and regulate, we then have at least some control, in which a current situation, we have zero control. And if we ban, we're gonna have less control than we already have. And it's hard to get less than zero control. You know, one other concern for me is that if we go ahead and ban, that we open our county up to a number of lawsuits, because A doesn't take into account Proposition 215 as state voted in law, and you can't change that. It also doesn't take into account that Prop 64 can't be changed. And it's suggesting a ban on medical and recreational with the one exception of being allowed to have in your own home, which, as a gentleman earlier said, people are gonna have to travel a long ways, and there's a lot of people out where I'm at that will have to travel a long ways to get their cannabis, and it's just not good. The roads where we're at aren't good in the first place. To add that traffic on them is not a bright idea. And then I also have one last question. Is how, and someone asked this earlier too, how did you guys establish the 22 legal businesses? Where did that come from? And is there a way to find out what those are so that your residents can at least go and do business with the legitimate businesses in the community so they're not putting themselves at risk, you know? I think if it's not public knowledge or easily accessible public knowledge the way your EIR is for everybody, then it makes it hard for the public to know where to go and what to do. And I know the public is very supportive. You can see that behind me. So I'd hope that the council would take these safety measures into consideration and you know, work with regulation and do what the rest of the state's doing, which we can't avoid, and regulate and control the situation as opposed to losing the control that we've already lost. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, we have 8 minutes left. The gentleman that's in the very back of that line, you raise your hand. You're our last speaker. So please come forward. Yeah, come forward.
Him or me?
No, you were next, sir. Sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to check that I
No,
wasn't
no,
about to jump.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
Somebody went to kindergarten. Thank you.
Better to ask permission. My name's Ben Eilenberg. It's EILENBERG. I'm an attorney for Industrial Partners Group. We specialize in industrial and commercial land development. We are looking to the County of Kern to develop this area and both obviously be a presence and also to be a resource to the county. Let me start out actually, and I'll keep it short because I know we've got time limitations, by complimenting Ms. Oviatt and the entire staff on, frankly, something that makes my job a lot easier. The EIR is fantastic. It has addressed really a lot of the issues. I've actually read all 3,000 pages of it. It was a long read, but it was well worth it. I wanted to address a couple of the issues that had come up and a couple of the issues that have not yet come up. I will say, obviously, I'm a proponent of option B, but I will say that I think the EIR very well addresses both option A and B. I think the issue for Kern is one of, there are basically two issues. The first is, can it use option B to essentially centralize itself as the cultivation center for the state, as well as the supporting services, which include dispensaries, manufacturing, distribution, labs, et cetera, the way that it has done in other agricultural and the oil and gas fields? And I think the answer is yes, because we already have the agricultural infrastructure built here, and through proper regulation, the way that the EIR sets out, I think that we have things set up in such a way that this works and that you guys can establish yourselves as the center. The nice thing about that, and to address the question that was raised by the prior speaker about the graduating tax rates, is that this is an industry with a fairly large infrastructure build out when they commit to a site. So while yes, as various locales keep on introducing legalization, there is going to be more of a supply of available acreage. Once the industry has been built in a region, the cost of building is in the millions. And to try to move an operation after that to try to get a lower tax rate is a Herculean effort. And frankly, the amounts that you are looking to do the increases on are not enough, I don't think, having represented this industry, to drive the industry away. I think that it's actually an elegant solution that has been reached. I will tell you this, in Colorado, we have learned a number of lessons. I think many of them have been incorporated. The interesting thing is that as legalization and regulation has increased, certain things that were counterintuitive happened, including the fact that for high school age teenagers, marijuana usage went down after legalization and recreation regulation. It's a matter of properly regulating. I will say, I think that the CUP process being applied to each of the dispensaries' applications is a very good step there, because you are checking to make sure that this person who is coming in and running one of the 20 dispensaries authorized will be a good neighbor. And that really is the big question that you guys face, is who do you want as your neighbors? Obviously, you want local people as well as responsible people who are coming here to be in this industry to be the neighbors who are moving in. I think that all around it is something that this EIR addresses. Simply to address very briefly some of the questions regarding the prior 22 dispensaries. I know about the legal history within
and our
Kern,
staff will
but-
explain that.
But yes, I will say, I think that the phase out does make sense and works, and obviously allowing people to apply via that CUP process makes sense. I do want to offer myself as a industry information resource. Obviously, Miss Lorelei as well as Mr. Nations may call upon me, as well as any supervisor who might be useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask the gentleman in the red. You put your hand up, so you wanted to speak. Is that correct?
Yes, but
Okay.
I'm disabled, so I can't stand on that.
Okay. Then we need to get a microphone for him. And
there.
okay, yeah.
It's not for long.
Come on up, please. I want you to go, and then we'll go to the lady after you, and then continue down the line.
So there is the option of a complete ban, and I'm asking, as a disabled person, that doesn't happen.
Okay. Would you state your name, please?
My name is Roy Turney.
Thank you.
I start off in both feet. I have plantar fasciitis. I broke my knee, which needs to be replaced. However, I have a total hip replacement on that side already. I have nerve damage in my lower back and my neck, which goes out to my extremities. A complete ban would make me drive hours to get medication, causing more pain. And if I chose the other option to that, I could be back on 150, 250 oxycodons a month, which everybody knows is a real problem in our nation. So when you're looking to ban or not ban, think about the people like me, please.
Thank you.
Hello there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Rose Becerra. I'm a board member for Green Gate Collection. I would like to tell you a little bit about our collective. We've been open since 2010. We started off in the county for the first 2 years and have since relocated to city limits because of Measure G. From the first year up until this point, we have paid a total of $299,477 for the BOE taxes and $61,856 for the EDD, and an estimated amount of $140,534 to the IRS for the payroll taxes. We at Greengate Collective enjoy supporting our community in other ways by donating to different places in the community, and in other ways by donating to other places in the community of Bakersfield. For example, the Jameson Center, churches, the following schools: Westside Elementary, Casa Loma Elementary, Sequoia Middle School. We sponsor local bowling leagues and children's football teams as well. Since 2010, Greengate Collective has had an outstanding record of safety and being compliant with all law enforcement, code enforcement, and fire departments when needed. If any collectives are going to be allowed to stay open, we would like you to consider allowing us back into the county as we were once, back in 2010. And to keep in mind of those who are currently paying taxes and are reaching out to all aspects in our community. On behalf of the Greengate Collective, we thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, I'm Dennis Turner from Frazier Park. I'm an instructor. Go ahead. Turner, T-U-R-N-E-R. I'm an instructor at one of our local high school. And some of the kids are starting to refer to Frazier Park as Frazier Weed, or Lake of the Woods as Lake of the Weeds, to say that kids aren't going to be, that marijuana isn't going to be made more available to them just isn't true. I'm already seeing that there. They can find brothers, they can find people with reputable character that will buy marijuana for them at the local. We have 2 dispensaries now. One looks like a blockhouse square. It's probably 50 feet within dance studio where they teach kids anywhere from 3 to 18 how to dance. There's a reason for all the bars. I'm sure Bakersfield has seen robberies at these places. And hey, what's better? Rip off a whole bunch of money and get your dope too. I don't want to see these allowed to stay in Frazier Park. I'm for a complete ban. And I know there's a lot of things being thrown about money. And yes, county may make some money, state will make some money. There's billions of dollars involved here. And part of that money isn't just going to local good guys. It is going to the cartels. They are some of the people that are backing this whole program. I was a narc for 15 years. I work with DEA, you name it. I says to lots of different agencies, this isn't going to go away. Your problems are just going to get worse. And we may have lost it in California, but maybe our small town, you guys can put a band on it, save our town. I just see nothing but problems. Appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Next, please.
Hi there. By the way, some of the best alcohol is made in basements. Just wanted to let you know. I'm kidding. That's a joke. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is David Abbasi. I am a native of Bakersfield, and I love my hometown. I am president of the Central Valley Cannabis Association. Our members are professional business people, some of whom have been legally operating in the county for years without any incident. We are self-regulating with good practices. I'm very happy to see the board and the planning department taking a responsible approach to the situation and seriously looking at regulations. As we all know, bans don't work. Prohibition leads to proliferation. Only regulations will allow the county to get a handle on the situation and restore order. Without regulations, we will have the status quo, no money to enforce, no control, and more access to marijuana by minors and unauthorized persons. Regulations are necessary to reduce crime, eliminate the black market, and protect public health and safety. Regulations also create jobs, tax revenue, and other economic benefits.
We are ready to work with the county to help maximize these benefits. Please take into consideration reasonable access for medical marijuana, as was the intent of Proposition 215, to provide safe and affordable distribution for the many folks in Kern that need it for medicine. Thank you very much for everything, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Brust. I'm with Bakersfield Residents Against Pot Shops. I live in the Oleander area of Bakersfield. We have had 14, or continue to have 14 illegal pot shops, some of which have closed. We recently got the city of Bakersfield to pass a new ordinance to go after the landlords that are renting these pot shops that are illegal and have been illegal by ordinance since at least 2008 in the city of Bakersfield. We have to note that Proposition 64, which has been cited before I got up here, was overwhelmingly voted down in the county of Kern. I think the people of the county of Kern have already spoken on this issue, and they've already said we don't want these shops here. Regarding the EIR that we currently have, there were a couple of issues, if this is to go forward, that I think we need to address. One, we haven't addressed the location of pot shops to Social Security payees. These are groups such as Steward Inc. or Catholic Charities that dispense funds to, in some cases, drug addicts to get them, to help them pay their bills and get them taken care of. Until recently, until the city of Bakersfield actually closed one down, there was one adjacent to Catholic Charities right on Chester Avenue. This is a serious problem. These people are trying to get off drugs. We cannot allow these pot shops to be near them. Churches, there was no reference to churches. Again, churches are where people go for Narcotics Anonymous or Alcohol Anonymous or any of the other drugs that they want to be anonymous about. Residential sober living facilities were not mentioned in the EIR that I saw. I think those things need to be addressed. Proximity to the homeless shelter is something we need to take a look at. Just recently, Louis Gill noted that there is a proliferation of not only marijuana, but synthetic marijuana, synthetic cannabis near the homeless shelter. Sometimes these things are being packaged to kids. They're being labeled to kids. They're being put in forms of gummy bears and lollipops, all sorts of things that we've dealt with when we dealt with cigarettes. We got rid of these, but yet we're ready to bring them back in to the county of Kern, things that are clearly marketed towards our children. Our Sheriff Johnny Youngblood has spoken publicly against this proposal. I think that says a lot for where law enforcement resides in regards to this option A or option B. As it stands right now, unless we've heard differently, the state of California has made no regards to whether or not felons or convicted felons that are out of prison can run these pot shops or not. Can they work as cultivators or not? Are we going to let drug dealers that have come out of jail come back in and start selling drugs again? Those are some of the questions that we have. This is not to disparage all of the pot shops, but the reality is, in the city of Bakersfield alone, we have close to 70 illegal pot shops. They've already shown themselves not to want to live by the rules of the law, not want to live by the rules that we've established for them. Establishing more rules for them to break is not going to change what happens with many of these shops. Regarding the county islands, our group, Bakersfield Residents Against Pot Shops, do not believe that county islands should be the place to have any pot shops. Because while they might go by your rules, they're not going to go by the city of Bakersfield, for instance, their ban on marijuana dispensaries. And allowing them in a county island is going to basically de facto get rid of their ban within the city of Bakersfield. Finally, one last thing. just recently, about 2 weeks ago, the Bakersfield Californian came out with a story how driving under the influence has now been surpassed. It's no longer alcohol. It's now drugs that people are under when people die in fatalities. And 40% of those, according to the Bakersfield Californian, are marijuana caused. These are the issues that we're going to be dealing with, and these are the issues that are going to be coming in before you. And it's something that you need to really take to heart. And Bakersfield Residents Against Pot Shops would like to say, we'd like the option A. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Edward Martinez. I'm a marijuana advocate. And as far as she's saying there's no place where you could get alcohol and smoke at the same place, the Elks Lodge in Santa Maria does that. And I just wanted to get a better understanding on how do you expect people to go and medicate themselves if they don't have a residence and they are homeless and they can't go to a park, a public park, or go someplace. Where would they be able to go legally to medicate themselves if they're homeless? That's one thing I would like to be answered. And also, if you were to pass this ban in the 22 stores that are open, and then you do pass that law when it has to be a half a mile, how many stores would be open? Who owns those properties in those areas? Because there are going to be too many. Bakersfield ain't that big. From a store, from a school, there's schools every mile. And that makes it a whole mile around that school. So that limits us to very little space to get businesses going. So that right there I'd like to be looked at. Also, where will we be able to, they have hookah lounges where people can go and enjoy themselves and relax. Why can't there be a place, a business place where they could go, relax, have ventilation there so good that no one else would be affected by it? And that's all. I just didn't want to waste your time. I just want to put that in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Last speaker, come forward, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Langworthy, and I just had a couple questions. With the mitigation measures, you had mentioned 4.13-3 is a 45 cent per square foot of building space. Is that brick and mortar building, or is that outdoor cultivation license type as well? And the same question goes for the $5 per square foot of potential cultivation space. Is that just the indoor growing, or is that your potential license type for outdoors as well? Also, I wanted to recommend on the, I guess it'd be the separate and distinct boundaries they had mentioned in Mount Cursa for medicinal and adult use. I would recommend following the state's advice on that, as they have not clearly defined that.
Okay. Thank you. All right, that's the conclusion of the public hearing period. You will have other opportunities. I'm sorry, he was the last speaker.
I'll be brief, less than 2 minutes.
He was the last speaker, ma'am. But you will have another opportunity. We are going to have a planning commission hearing, and we will have a board of supervisors hearing. The planning commission on September 28th, and the board of supervisors on in October of 2017.
Yeah, I'm aware of that too. I know community residents I work with weren't able to come today since it was a 2 p.m. meeting, so I'll just be really brief. Please, this is a public briefing. Community residents, they live in a county island in Rexon Acres, and I think that's part of the conversation today. There's currently 4 marijuana dispensaries in this county island. So as we look forward into the EIR, what's the possibility of not having marijuana dispensaries? Because they're right across city limits as well, so how is that going to impact community residents? And even going back to the 0.5 mile radius, looking at expanding into that, because there's community parks and also schools that are half a mile away from these dispensaries. And then if you're looking at option B, the availability of options of how those dollars are going to be spent, not only specific departments, but looking into other departments such as rural communities, you're seeing that there's a lack of housing opportunities for farm workers as well. So I think as we look at the different options, looking at the different feasibilities of exploring how to distribute these dollars. But community residents of Rexon Acres, this is their concern. They don't want to see 5 marijuana dispensaries in their county island. Thank you.
What is your name?
Patricia Leal.
Thank you.
Ms. Oviatt? We'd like to, no, the comment period's over. The, Ms. Oviatt, there were several questions that were asked, and are you able to answer any of those questions at this point, or would you like to, I don't know if you want to carry some of those answers over, please.
Chairman Scrivener's, members of the board, the majority of these are questions that will be answered in the response to comments for the EIR. We are in a public comment. I would like to touch on a couple of questions that I can answer. First, the question about that there's a gap in the ordinance because we're not addressing medicinal and adult use. There are 3 state agencies with hundreds of people writing regulations right now, as well as the legislature that's put forward regulations that will address how these dispensaries operate inside. For example, if they sold medicinal and adult use, they would have to have a separate entrance for medicinal because it's 18. It would have to be completely segregated from the adult use. We are in a different world now. For 18 years, we have had no rules. We have not permitted any of these dispensaries, and the city of Bakersfield has not issued permits for any of the 70. We have regulated nothing. The state is now regulating. The legislature has already banned lollipops, they've banned gummy bears, they've banned cartoons on packages. I would need an entire day to bring forward all of the draft regulations, and we will be attempting to summarize those. So many of the issues that have been brought up are legitimate issues, but they deal with the last 18 years, and we are going to take their questions and put them through a mix of what will the state be regulating. So for example, the state will not give out a license to a felon, and they will do background checks that go far beyond any background check that we can do. They will go into the corporations, they will go into the LLCs, they will go into everything and look to see. And our ordinance on a ban, to be very clear, if we ban it, they cannot get a license from the state. That was very clear in Prop 64. The legislature has reiterated it. If we ban it, they cannot get a license from the state. And whether the state will then come down and help us put all of the illegal ones in the city of Bakersfield and their help, we don't know yet. They've said they will, but it's a big state. If we regulate it, they will respect our regulations first. So you have to get a permit from us first before you can get one from the state. So some of these will be answered in the response to comments, but that's the medical. The second question is the gentleman who has been operating in Ridgecrest. I respectfully ask him to submit his information to the department. We will consult with county council. We've received our list of 22. We have maps in the materials given to you. They have addresses, and we will pull that map out and repost it on our website so that people can see what those 22 are. But we will take the information that's given to us on the Ridgecrest. At this point, in the 22, there are none in Ridgecrest. I'd also like to point out that in Frazier Park, there is one on this list, but the second one is illegal. So once again, we are in a situation of complaint-driven. When one of these opens, someone needs to let us know, and we may already have that on our list and be going after the second one in Frazier Park. The issue on the 45 cents, it is on outdoor cultivation as well. So if you have an acre, you're going to pay 45 cents on your acre if we do that. It's on cultivation as well. I would also note that nurseries are growing plants, and the definition of cultivation says growing plants, but we can clarify that. And then the last thought that I wanted to just address was, really quickly, was that was the last comment. The rest of the comments, we've taken extensive notes. We will review the hearing for the public comments and make sure that they are addressed in the response to comments that will be released before the Planning Commission. Thank you.
And as I said, the Planning Commission meeting is on September 28th scheduled, so the response to comments will be out before that meeting. Thank you. Okay, I'll return to the board. Supervisor Couch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. One is sort of a process or practical question. When this comes back to the board, after the planning commission hearing, what type of latitude are we going to have when we have our hearing to discuss, amend, change, alter, whatever, any of these conditions that might be recommended? For example, take spacing, for example.
Supervisor Couch through the chair, if it is a mitigation measure, you can amend it. If it is in the ordinance, you can amend it within certain parameters. For example, we will have published the entire ordinance in the newspaper, therefore you have all the latitude you want. We will publish both ordinances in their entirety. We will not do a summary. Therefore, you have complete latitude to make recommendations.
I guess I'm wondering, in the context of CEQA, if we change something from pick something, a half-mile spacing to a longer spacing or a shorter spacing, what type of impact does that have on the EIR that you did and the study that you did?
Supervisor Couch, we took that into account when we did the analysis to
Okay.
provide you that latitude.
Okay. I didn't hear it today, but I think there's something else that we, with regard to spacing in particular, that we ought to consider, and that is when it comes to cities and what they have decided and how we and what our ordinance, if passed, might do or how it might impact them. I'd like us to take a look at, well, let me back up and say it this way. If we use some spacing from the city limits every time there's an annexation, which in some cases might take, there might be lots of time in between annexations, or there might be some almost every couple of months. That half-mile spacing is going to morph and it's going to change every time there's an annexation. I think, I don't know if we can do this, but I'd like to ask if we can look at if a city has an ordinance or a resolution where they say, let's say they're for it, they're against it, whether it's dispensaries, manufacturing, whatever, that we would implement our ordinance we would try to match their desires in their sphere of influence. I don't think the EIR looked at that or contemplated that. Is that something you can still do?
Supervisor Couch, we will put that in as an analysis that we can bring forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. I don't see any other requests from members of the board. Supervisor Gleason.
Just one real quick. When it comes back to the board, is it possible, or is it, something we should do, is having a report somehow from the AMA and their position on the health effects of marijuana?
Supervisor Gleason, we can work with public health and bring you forward a report. There are a variety of studies that have been done. However, it's not been legalized long enough, so the studies kind of sometimes contradict each other. But I will certainly reach out to public health and others and bring you that report. In addition, I apologize, I did forget to note that I'm working with the sheriff to bring forward a report on crime in the areas of the dispensaries. And I don't have that report done yet. I've been working with the sheriff on it. So I can put those on the list.
I'm not afraid of the conflicting reports. I welcome them. The more conflicting, the better. That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. Thank you for your hard work. The timeline on this has been really remarkable. Clearly, lots of interest from the community to resolve what are purely economic issues, which I think are potentially very exciting, but also public safety and human interests that are profoundly important. And I appreciate your work with our sheriff and our CAO to look at best practices across the country and what we see happening around the state. So my appreciation and congratulations on an incredible timeline. With that said, are there only 2 remaining opportunities for the public? So there's some folks here who would like to be heard. You will be heard either at our next board session when this board makes a decision about how to proceed, or the Planning Commission hearing. Are those the next 2 and only 2 opportunities? Just so the public is aware procedurally what they're looking at next.
Supervisor Perez, through the chair, of course, they can submit written comments at any time. They can submit written comments on a variety of opportunities. So they could submit written comments now, they can then come up with some other thoughts and send us another email. So we have provided on our website, the Kern County Planning and Natural Resources website, there is a cannabis land use project link, and there is information on who to email those comments to, and we welcome those comments.
Excellent, very helpful.
Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for all the effort that's gone into this. It's a Herculean task, and it has ruined many evenings already in my life that I have spent reading this thing. That it's just huge. I can really turn pages fast on my iPad as I try to figure out what it all says. But I have a bunch of questions. In the array of how communities across California are dealing with the marijuana industry, where does 2 million feet of cultivation, indoor cultivation, 150 acres of outdoor cultivation, and 500,000 square feet of processing, packaging, and distribution operations, where in the array of other communities does that place us?
Supervisor Maggard, I will have to give you kind of a range based on specifics. The 500,000 of processing actually puts us at the lower scale, since we have since this would be countywide in a county that's bigger than Rhode Island. Yet the city of Lancaster just approved a 650,000 square foot processing and preparation, and California City has. So the 500,000 of processing and preparation, given our size, puts us at the bottom. The 2 million of indoor cultivation puts us in the middle. The 150 puts us dead last, since Calaveras County has 1,000 individual farmers farming hundreds of thousands of acres. So, or I forgot how many acres 1,000 farms is. So, and that was a consideration on the part of the planning department. I appreciate the comments about us being the Emerald Triangle. That is not the planning department's viewpoint on how to bring forward a regulatory on this issue. So we did try to stay with a moderate amount, and so we're not at the top.
Next question has to do with money. This cash counting room that has been referenced by you. How does the industry work? And there's a perception amongst some that proceeds from marijuana sales cannot be deposited into a bank because it's against federal law. How would the county receive this money? Would we just be getting piles of cash? Piles and piles of cash?
We have been, Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, we have been working with our treasurer, tax collector, and our CAO. We will be bringing you a more comprehensive report, but state banks can set up accounts, and many of these places do have accounts and have been paying to the Franchise Tax Board through banking accounts. Our treasurer, tax collector is on a statewide committee that's making recommendations on this, and we will be bringing you a more comprehensive delineation of the banking issue, but we do believe we have options that would resolve it.
When will we hear that information as the process continues until this comes back to the board?
We will have for the Planning Commission, we will have a structure lined out, and we will have more details for you, and we will have people there that we'll make sure our treasurer tax collector is in attendance at the board meeting.
Thank you. Next question is, why do you believe we'll be any more successful in regulating the industry if option B were to be adopted? Why would we be any more successful in regulating this industry then than we are now?
Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, right now we've been on our own. We have no state regulations. We can't even call up the water board and complain to them about someone's outdoor grow. The Compassionate Care Act provided no regulation that we could use in order to manage that. That's one issue. The second issue is that the state of California, taxes that are separate from the taxes that we've been talking about have been established by the voters of Prop 64. Those taxes are predicted to produce $1 billion for the state from this $5 billion industry. That's what the Department of Finance's report shows. At that point, the state of California has a commitment and has an interest in actually helping to pull out the illegal. They have a reason to actually come and help shut down illegal operations. Before this, there was no structure. There wasn't even a state agency you can call. Now there'll be 3 state agencies with hundreds of employees dedicated to this issue. So that's one issue. The second issue is that we haven't actually ever permitted. And from the same perspective of, you know, why do we permit dry cleaners? And if someone opened an illegal dry cleaner and we had a complaint, we would go and we would take code compliance, and we have a zoning ordinance that's fully compliant with state law. The gray area, which I defer to county council, but the gray area of the Compassionate Care Act has been difficult for us to navigate from a legal perspective. Zoning law has been in place since 1922 when it was established by the United States Supreme Court. We will have zoning laws that we can implement that have a clear pathway, clear permits, and we'll have the state support for that. And if we regulated and if we had revenue, we would have a way of making sure, including inspections by public health, the edibles all have to be tested, you know, they'll be inspected by the state. And so that's the reason. The reason is it's a completely different structure than we have now. Now, I am not optimistic that it will not take an effort and time to set up this program, to implement this program. The state is still writing regulations. But under the ban, the question of whether the state will come down immediately and help us close all of these illegal dispensaries or close the ones in the cities, which are across the street, is in question. One last thing I will leave you. There are operators who are interested in relocating to Kern County. They're not operating here now. These are business people. They have investment money, and they're interested in doing it properly. They have indicated that in LA, they have brought nuisance lawsuits against illegal dispensaries around them and closed them down on their dime because it's illegal competition. That is an avenue that we have never explored. I don't know any dispensaries, since they're all illegal, that have shut any other ones down. But that is something that's been very successful in Los Angeles.
This is not meant to be disparaging towards you, but earnest, sincere members of our county staff have come to us now over several years and suggested, you should do this, you should do that, you should follow this course, we should do, and we have a mess. And it's virtually unregulated. The courts won't support what the voice of the people in Kern County, of how they spoke out about this. I have little confidence. I can be told all day long that we'll have a plan and it will work, but I have little confidence that that will be effective. So before I can proceed on this, I need a lot more reassurance that it appears that it will be able to be regulated. And in a discussion I had with our sheriff yesterday, he has very strong opinions about not only the underground black market growing and selling that will take place if all of the rest of it is regulated, but he also has expressed concerns, as I read in the paper, about whether or not we can expect him to help enforce these things, these rules and regulations that we come up with. So I hope that we can incorporate the Sheriff's Department into a substantive conversation at the Planning Commission level and back to us so we can understand exactly how that will play back and forth. Can you give me any better definition today of unincorporated communities?
Supervisor Maggot, through the chair, in our general plan, we have a list of unincorporated communities that are based on census tracts. In our housing element that your board has adopted, those lists are in there as well. An unincorporated community is classified as residential units with some commercial. So we don't have an unincorporated community with miles and miles of ag land. So for example, Lost Hills is an unincorporated community. Rosamond, that has 16,000 people, is an unincorporated community, and there's actually a specific plan with a boundary. Western Rosedale has been designated under the specific plan as an unincorporated community. So those are the maps that we are designing. Your board is not constrained by those maps, however. If you would like to redraw lines for the unincorporated communities, merge communities such that there would be less, there would be, if we stay with the two, and the two, there was a legal reason for that, so we weren't giving a monopoly to one dispensary, we could actually redraw those maps. So we are working to bring forward the maps. I can assure you that there are many, many more than 40 communities. So it is the concern of Rexland Acres that there be 5 in the county would not happen under this ordinance. However, some communities will have none. So we understand the concern about that. We'll bring the maps forward to the Planning Commission, and we'll bring forward other alternatives on how the communities might be combined, for example, such that there was a larger distance and there was larger density.
So I'm just going to name off a few, what I have always thought of as neighborhoods, but under the definition you've given, it strikes me that they might be unincorporated communities. Oildale, Green Acres, Rosedale, East Bakersfield, Hilltop. We could have dozens of unincorporated communities around the greater Bakersfield area. That causes me great concern because we could have, in fact, a proliferation of dispensaries in the unincorporated areas. So can you speak to that? And well, I'll ask a follow-up question when you finish.
I can, Supervisor Maggart. That's the reason we'd like to bring you alternatives. For example, Hilltop, although it is a neighborhood, has never been classified as an unincorporated community. Some of this is based on census tracts. Some of it's based on traditional. We are re-examining all of these definitions. But Greenfield is, Lamont, Oildale, East Bakersfield, Rosedale. So we are, those are legitimate concerns, and we are going to examine those.
So to follow up with a question that Supervisor Couch asked, if we were to decide that we wanted to only have, I'm going to make up a number, 5 dispensaries or 500, is there any range that we are constrained from being able to adopt as we go through the process and the 5 of us, reach a conclusion as to what we think is appropriate for our community?
Supervisor Maggart, through the chair, I defer to County Council. There are some concerns about the amortization process if you regulate and whether there are enough places for the 22 to actually relocate. But remember that of the 22, half of those are, 7 of those are in Eastern Kern, 1 is in Fraser Park, and the rest are in Metro Bakersfield. So that would be something to look at. The second issue is just not that it is the number 1 issue, but it is one in the mix, which is that it would affect the revenue necessary to implement the actual, it would affect the amount of revenue. However, there is nothing that says that your board cannot adopt one of the alternatives. Cultivation only, no dispensaries. 2 dispensaries, and more cultivation. There's nothing that constrains you except the upper limits of 2 million square feet and 500,000 square feet. Allowing more than 40 dispensaries would be a problem for the environmental impact report, but I hear your question being, can you go in the opposite direction?
Next question, what if the tax increase doesn't pass? This community wouldn't pass a tax on people who don't even live here, who come here to stay in hotels. They're pretty tax adverse here. So what if we set all of this up and it is all enabled and the tax increase does not pass?
Supervisor Maggart, we are working on a presentation of a variety of alternatives, and it's not ready for you yet to answer that question.
That's a significant question to me, then.
Understood.
You alluded to crime statistics. That is of paramount concern to me. Multiple murders, attempted murders, strong-arm robberies, kidnappings, torture, gunfights, all of these things have occurred at these dispensaries and near these dispensaries. So that question of crime is probably the most significant question I have in my mind as I think about whether or not I want these in the neighborhoods that I represent. And that goes to the next question, which is, this may be a non-starter for me. The current recommendation is that we would allow dispensaries in C1 neighborhood commercial and C2 general commercial, as well as CH highway commercial. The neighborhood and general commercial zoning areas have residences adjacent to them. Sometimes the residences are in the midst of them, and those crime statistics are going to be very significant to me as to whether or not the five of us are willing to allow families to live and children to be in their bedrooms asleep at nighttime a few feet away from C1 and C2 locations where these might be located. So I'll do my duty and listen and learn as we go through the process, but exposing residences to that is a very significant issue to me. There was you alluded to it, you didn't discuss it today, but you alluded to it in the EIR material about community grows. And it was referenced, as somebody alluded to earlier, there's so much to read. I might have missed some, it was Mr. Godinez. I might have missed some of the treatment of it, but community grows, for example, could a homeowners association decide that they'll have a collective garden in the homeowners association? And one of my concerns is that I don't want those who don't want to be associated with the marijuana industry to be forced to deal with the marijuana industry by default. I want the system to protect those who don't want to be involved in this, don't want to be adjacent to it. I want to protect them from being forced to deal with it by default. So do you have any comments about that?
Supervisor Maggart, that would not be allowed. A homeowner association could not, it's 6 plants per person for your own personal use. They can't have a community garden to grow marijuana.
What was the
under
collective?
the Proposition 64.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm sorry.
I apologize. What was the collective garden reference in the EIR alluding to?
Oh, we were prohibiting them from community gardens.
Only prohibiting them?
That's correct,
Okay.
prohibiting them under either scenario. Prohibit.
Another concern I have that I'd like to see addressed is how we secure and maintain a safe environment for the transport of the marijuana material, because it is to those that are willing to be corrupt, it is a rolling gold mine. So I'm interested in how you will prove to us that that's going to be safe. What's the consequence to those Indian tribes who are interested in obtaining tribal lands in our community? You don't have to answer this now, but I want you to answer to us. Can they add to these limits within Kern County, or can they go contrary to or beyond what we want to have happen? I'm interested in an analysis of that. And again, this is not disparaging to anybody on our staff, but I think this calls for outside legal review. We need to have, we have been so unsuccessful in defending the positions that we've taken that I think we should have a review of this by attorneys that have a great deal more experience with it than we do. Because whatever it is that we decide to do, our community deserves for it to be able to be, if it's regulation, it deserves to be regulated. They deserve to get what we tell them they're going to get. So, and if it's a ban, then we need to be able to assure them that it's going to be a ban. So, okay, I'll have many more questions, but that for now is the gist of it. When will we be able to hear about the crime issues?
Supervisor Maggart, your board will receive a copy of the response to comments. So towards the end of September, you will receive that, and we will have the crime statistics in that response to comments, as well as the beginning of the health report.
Okay, I'll have some discussions with you and with the Sheriff's Department about being able to see that, preview that information as it begins to be developed and put together. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggart. Supervisor Perez.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. Your estimates, Director, do seem conservative on revenue. I appreciate that. I think it's important to be realistic when looking at the potential economic impact. I work as part of my role at CSAC. We are taking the issue of cannabis regulation, the issues of banking, very seriously, as we are the lobbying arm for all 58 counties. Many counties are way behind where we are. Some are ahead simply by virtue of their own production. And in the tri-counties, the real Emerald Triangle, I understand between those 3 counties, they produce a revenue between 5 and 8 billion, or that's how they have advised the CSAC operations as to how to think about this for incoming supervisors that have been very concerned about the public safety and other issues, but now with post-64 are in a new era of thinking about these issues, which is, I think, true about this board largely. But with that said, what we have found through a number of visits to the locations, panels, talking with their planning directors, is a very robust relationship with the industry and its players, so critical. And I'm happy to see such open flow of information. There are a couple people here today that advise me personally, provide information to our office and otherwise, and I appreciate that. As we use that in our CSAC operations for the entire state and how we think about these issues. So I certainly appreciate that. In particular, what I have learned, Director, through this process with CSAC is the self-regulation component seems to be the most profound and the most significant when it comes to really the larger picture of how does a community do anything safely. And it appears as though in places in California where it has been successful, it has really been the partnership of industry players that have been around a long time, want a legitimate business, are hurt economically and otherwise by illegal and violent operations, and are very eager to have a place at the table and to help the conversation along. In particular, I know there are folks here that are knowledgeable even about private enforcement through the civil code of shutting down and regulating these bad players, which have given the entire industry a terrible name, and rightfully so, but not fair and not reasonable for these particular hearings. So I want to say thanks to those folks who have helped me understand what's happening around the state, how we do this properly if we're going to do it. And I know the potential for revenue appears to be profound based on what we're actually seeing. And CSAC is cautiously moving forward, but certainly want to be a tool to counties to do this properly for those that are going to take it head on. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. I want to thank everyone who appeared here today to speak. Sincerely, we appreciate your input. Ms. Oviatt, to you and your staff, thank you for the incredible work that you've been doing on this. It's a tremendous amount of information to sift through and organize and analyze, and so we really do appreciate everything you've done. The requested action is to receive and file. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
All right, that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda for today, and so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to Monday, August 28th at 6 p.m. for budget hearings.
So moved.
We are adjourned.